it's nice to have you here with me today, and we'll speak about some of the updates that occurred with this revision 3. You know, it was 19 years before we had a revision 2, and then in a very short time we've had revision 3. This is just a little bit about myself, and I've been in clinical research for some time. I started out my career as a med tech in a hospital, then I went to pharmacology research in large pharma, and then I moved over to clinical research. And I've been, in addition to working in data management for a significant amount of time, I've also done some extensive training with Barnett in multiple venues, such as the pharma, biotech, and the NIH. And so I've had some experience in training multiple types of topics. So let's hope that today will be beneficial for your understanding and for your, let's say, I don't know if you're meeting a requirement for training, but hopefully will not be boring you to death in the next hour and a half. So our learning objectives for today will be looking at the potential SOPs that you might need for electronic systems used to collect and manage clinical trial data under the ICH Revision 3. Now, I will be honest with you that many of the things that ICH has embraced have also been on the books for us in the U.S. with the FDA guidance for computerized systems used for clinical trials. So most of this information will not necessarily be new to you. We'll talk about data integrity considerations and their critical role in clinical trials as outlined in the revised guidelines, because in the revised guidelines, they actually pay attention to IRB in particular, the investigator and the sponsor, and they really spent multiple time in defining roles and responsibilities. We'll identify risk management principles in clinical trial conduct and their direct connection to our CDM practices. And then look at quality management principles, because they do talk about quality and quality by design, and look to implement a risk-based quality approach in clinical trials, because it used to be that, you know, risk-based monitoring, for example, was an option that we could espouse to, and it's not an option anymore. It is pretty much a requirement, as these guidance have shown us. And so basically, to review the principles of ICH GCP, we have the ethical principles, risk versus benefits, the right, safety, and well-being of trial subjects, patients, now we call them participants, are to be considered. Trials should be scientifically designed and sound in their protocol. I used to work for a pharma that got a couple of sendbacks from the FDA after that quote-unquote rule of thumb. If you hear nothing in 30 days, you can get started. Well, they waited until about 45 days before they came back and said they didn't like certain parameters and statements in the protocol. Informed consent is still a very important thing for GCP, and informed consent issues are still, let's say, a vast component of 483s. And so also we have to have the confidentiality of participants that will be protected. And so the ICH Revision 3, their objectives were that this is to be an application of good clinical practice to increasingly new trial types, new designs, and new data sources. It's to provide flexibility and facilitate the use of new technology innovations in clinical trials. It's to strengthen a proportionate risk-based approach for making clinical trials to support regulatory decision-making and build quality by design into all aspects, focused on quality and reliability of trial results, and it was to focus in alignment with the ICH E8 Revision 1. So here's the schematics. It talks about the ICH overall principles, and a significant piece of the Revision 3 is this Annex 1, and it gives you the history where the principle, the published, or draft principles were published in April 2001. The Annex 1 really takes the concepts that were in the Revision 2 and really put it down bullet by bullet for each of the three components that they list, the ICH investigator and sponsor. And then there's considerations for non-traditional interventional clinical trials, and Annex 2 is on the books for development, and it'll be additional considerations for non-traditional interventional trials that have not been included in Annex 1. So in summary, we look and they require a well-designed and conducted clinical trial that is essential for moving forward in our clinical research. The expert working group, that's EWG, shares the perspective that trials should be efficient and robust to inform the decisions. And we know from a data management perspective, we want to ensure that our data is robust and correct as we hand it over to biostats for their analyses. The Revision 3 is being developed as a robust and responsive guideline that will facilitate innovation while protecting the trial participants. And again, that working group is working on Annex 1 and will continue to focus on a risk-based approach. So Annex 1 and the R3 was approved and finalized in January of this year. So there are 11 principles that are outlined in this guidance, or the revision rather. And so the first one is that clinical trials should be conducted in accordance with ethical principles. And we all know it originated in the Declaration of Helsinki back in the day, and that all the regulatory requirements should be adhered to and designed and conducted in ways that ensure the rights, safety, and well-being of participants. The second principle is informed consent, and it's an integral feature of the ethical conduct of a trial, and there are requirements for content of informed consent, and it's a very important factor that needs to be adhered to, and especially now with, quote-unquote, the opportunity to have things done, let's say with a DocuSign, for example. We'll have an informed consent in a registry. I used to work for a company that designed registries for rare diseases, and they would have the informed consent available on the registry, and the participant was to read through it, and there was an agreement by the investigators who were conducting this registry that there would be almost like a telehealth or a Zoom meeting, that they would be present to answer any questions that were available, made available as a result of reading the informed consent. The third is a clinical trial should be subject to independent review. And there are strict rules about who should be on an IRB and an IEC. And there's rules about a quorum. And one of the things in my career that I was really pleased about, I spent 6 years in North Dakota as a director of data management and built a team out there. And they had an IRB that was really functioned as, we would learn about IRBs per se, not the big giant Western IRBs or things. This was local community. It had physicians not on the board and not on the payroll at the clinic. They had attorneys, they had clergymen, they had people of the community that were concerned about what kind of clinical trials were going on in their environment. Fargo happened to be a large area where they had, we had a lot of phase 1 trials where we had a lot of participants, healthy volunteers, and so they wanted to make sure that these participants weren't exposed to anything really out of the question as far as safety was concerned. The fourth principle is that the trial should be scientifically sound for their intended purpose. And of course, when you have the statistical discussion in the protocol, we should be able to ensure that the information that's going to be garnered from this clinical trial will be able to support the suppositions that are made by biostats. This fifth one here, we should be well familiar with it. It was from the very first, is that we have to prove that we're qualified by training. So by attendance today with your certificate of attendance, and you can say that, yes, you attended a program on the Revision 3. Then quality should be built into scientific and operational design. And we know this as far as data management is concerned because we have rules We have documentation, such as our data management plan. We have checks and balances with our edit checks. And we have all of these instruments in EDC, for example, with our interactive case report forms that have built-in quality to allow for us to concentrate on those data that may be telling us a story that doesn't necessarily rely on an if, then, or else statement for your edit checks.